Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. This podcast is made possible by the Texas Bar Foundation. Today is a very special episode in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. We talked to the founders of Capital Area Mexican American Lawyers, which we know today as the Hispanic Bar Association of Austin. Decades ago, Jim Coronado, Tom Esparza, Javier Medina, David Mendez, and Richard Pena banded together to find space for Hispanic lawyers to work together to support one another and their role in the profession. Judge Jim Coronado is a graduate of the University of Texas and University of Texas School of Law. Judge Coronado served as the 427th Travis County District Court Judge. Prior to that, he served as Travis County District Court Magistrate and Municipal Judge in the cities of Kyle and Austin. He's a past president of the Austin Bar Association and past president of the Capital Area Mexican American Lawyers. At the state level, he served as chair of the State Bar Jury Service Committee, chair of the Hispanic Issues Section, and chair of the State Bar Opportunities for Minorities in the Profession Committee, and served as trustee on the Texas Bar Foundation. He was a founding member and president of the Mexican American Bar Association of Texas, and he has served as national vice president of the Hispanic National Bar Association. Tom Esparza is a graduate of Texas A&M and the University of Texas School of Law. He's a solo practitioner specializing in immigration and nationality law. In 1985, he became one of the first 3 Hispanic lawyers to hold that specialty. He previously served as Justice of the Peace for Precinct 4. He's a past chair of the Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico chapter of American Immigration Lawyers Association. He is also a past president of the Capital Area Mexican American Lawyers. Javier Medina is a graduate of the University of Texas at El Paso and the University of Texas School of Law. He had his own law practice for many years. He was the president of the Mexican American Bar Association of Austin and the president of the LULAC Council and presiding chair of the LULAC State Appellate Committee. He is also a past president of the Robert W. Calvert Inn of Court. At the state level, he was appointed to the Grievance Oversight Committee by the Texas Supreme Court, the State Bar of Texas Commission for Lawyer Discipline, District 9 Grievance Panel, Model Rules of Professional Conduct Drafting Committee, and CLE Planning Programs faculty. David Mendez is a graduate of St. Mary's University and the University of Texas School of Law. He was one of the first Hispanic partners in a major law firm as partner at Bickerstaff Heath Delgado Acosta LLP and has worked there for over 37 years. He's the former president of the Capital Area Mexican American Lawyers, former president of the Mexican American Bar Association of Texas, and he is the former president of the Texas Association of Community College Attorneys. Richard Pena is the founder and inaugural president of the Capital Area Mexican American Lawyers. He became the first Hispanic president and the first minority president ever of the Austin Bar Association in 1990, and then became the first Hispanic president and first minority president ever of the State Bar of Texas in 1998. For more information about Richard, listen to his episode of this podcast. You all are very accomplished. That was a very long introduction for you. Thank you so much for being here today. So we know why you're here. You founded this wonderful organization, but I first want to know, how did you come to know each other?
I think I was appointed Justice of the Peace, and so I had some visibility. But I think Richard approached me, or one of us, we started talking to each other because there had been a bar association before us, but they disbanded over a political endorsement. And we just felt the need. Richard had the vision. Richard approached me and had the vision. This is something that we were all capable of doing. I was just concerned with paying my mortgage. But it was right around that time, about 1980, 81, that we just came to know each other. My realm was not in corporate, law here in Austin. I knew Richard because Richard did workers' comp and I did immigration. So I was sending all my injured Mexican clients to Richard for workers' comp, and Richard's check kept me going. And that kind of got us going. And then I was appointed JP, and then Richard started calling the meeting. And Jim and I had known Jim from law school, but we hadn't really connected outside. And David, I didn't meet till much later.
Well, I was wondering about that. One thing y'all have in common is you all went to UT Law School. Did you know of each other there? Did you overlap?
Well, no, not quite, because these guys are a few classes ahead of me in law school, and so I had the privilege of meeting them as mentors. They were coming back to the law school to talk to us, because the 1977, 78 classes at UT Law School were among the largest Hispanic enrollments for the law school ever. And so these guys took time to come and meet us. So I was a student at the time when I met these fellows, and then I graduated in '80 and went to work for the controller at that time, Controller of Public Accounts, Bob Bullitt, and that's how I, as a young lawyer, that's how I kind of met up.
I was working out of my apartment on West 6th Street. But the one thing I was dedicated to doing was working in the bar. I felt that was important. I went to talk to the executive director of County Bar. Said, do you know Dickie Pena? He's a young lawyer, and he really starting out just like you are, and you need to meet him because he's a go-getter.
Yeah, my recollection of this band of lawyers is that not as much as the specifics of how we met each other, but it was the coming together of each other. I think that was what was important. And in telling this story, it's absolutely critical. I think that everyone understand the environment that we were in right now. It's not the environment it is now. And Tommy does a good job. I'm going to turn it over to him in a minute of outlining what the environment was. But there was a forerunner to our organization, Mexican American Lawyers in Austin. And unfortunately, there were two lawyers running for the same position of county court judge, and that splintered the organization right in half. And so I remember that meeting where they said, okay, everybody for this fella over here, and I'm for this fellow over here. And it never met again because there was a lot of bad feelings. Well, along the line, I think Tommy and I may have been on the board of the Center for Battered Women, and I think they had a fundraiser, and we're talking. And it just occurred to me that there needed to be an organization for minority lawyers, for Hispanic lawyers, because the prior organization was not going to happen, and there was so much bad blood. And so we figured we need a new vision, a new way, a new direction, a new organization that's not tied to political ambition. And we started kind of coming together. We were very fortunate, and I think Jim talks about that in his article that he wrote about the origins of the MAL, because it was almost like the stars were aligned. The gentleman that you see here, none of us practiced in the same area. And at the time, none of us knew what we were doing. We just knew that something had to be done. And we would meet in Tommy's house. He had a house. And Javier Medina, I need to mention him before we go any further, because he was a very important part of our organization, of the founders. He's not with us today, but he was very, very important. But anyway, Tommy has some good stories about how we got together. We had a vision. And then the five of us, and then David came in, and we all had our different areas. And as it turned out, everybody has become very successful. But Tommy, for example, was the entrepreneur. He was the go-getter. He was the one that was making money and is figuring things out. Jim, whether you wouldn't know it by him being a district judge, but he was the radical of the group. And I don't want to say bomb thrower because that's not kosher, but he was the one pressing. He was pressing for the change. And he would tell me, Richard, can we do this? And I would say, man, you're crazy. I'm young. But and then David was the smart guy. He was the intellectual, and he was with the big firm, and he was our entree to a lot of respectability among folks. Here's our big firm lawyer. We're cool. Javier was eventually wound up with a grievance. He was always pretty straight, but he got into the grievance area, and he was kind of our ethics expert. And I must tell you that in my book, we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we did, but we didn't. But we knew that things had to change. We knew it was unacceptable. We knew that the Hispanic population was growing. Lawyers are the voice of the Hispanic population to a large extent, and they needed a voice. And we came together in Tommy's house with just the five of us over and over and over. Somebody would bring a six-pack of beer, somebody bring the tacos, we'd sit around, we would talk about it, and we'd say, it got frustrating because there were very few Hispanic lawyers in the city practicing law. And we'd say, well, why do we keep doing this? And then we'd say, well, it has to be done. I mean, the flame has to, have to keep the flame alive because someday it'll be different. Someday there will be other lawyers and the people need it. One thing led to another. We finally, I think after a while, we said, well, we better elect a president. I mean, we got an organization, right? And we said, oh, okay. And so I was the first president, and we passed it around. I remember when we started a newsletter that we had copiers and didn't have computers or anything. And I remember copying up, we'd write stuff and legal stuff, and I'd mail it to target opinion makers in Austin, the judges, the legislature. And lo and behold, one day, legislature was in session and the Hispanic caucus was having a fundraising luncheon. And they invited me as president of this big organization. Our goal was for everybody to think we were a big organization, right? And for the five of us. And so, but we kept at it, and they invited me on the head table with these guys and with the legislators and, governor and whatnot. And I think we have arrived. State Bar caught on. State Bar invited us to the bench bar, and that may have been Charlie Smith doing because he was there. And then the rest is history. But we became friends. We have remained friends, and I don't know that it would have worked if not for the individual personalities. That no one was jealous of each other. Is one for all for one, and we didn't have a grand plan. Our plan was not to change the face of the State Bar of Texas to be more inclusive, but it turned out to be that way. That's what happened. So you never know.
Yeah, and it required project because hanging out, together was an important community building thing for us, but we needed to have something to work around. Mm-hmm. And as from our backgrounds, helping indigent folks and others, and a lot of our friends were in legal aid at the time, they worked either for Regina Rogoff over at the Legal Aid Society of Central Texas, which is now TRLA here, I think, or they worked for David Hall down in the Valley for TRLA. And so our natural inclination was to do things for the indigents, and so we started a created a little clinic on like Tuesday nights, or I can't remember what night of the week we'd get together every couple of weeks in East Austin, remember, off of 2nd Street, and
Martin Jr.
At the Martin Jr. night. I think you got it set up, Tommy, and then we'd all go and do triage for the legal aid guys, and then send that information on to the legal aid lawyers, and then they could process these clients. So people who wouldn't normally make the effort to go to the Legal Aid Society's store would come there, and we'd help them out at night and understand their case. I don't think, our project was to get them help.
Well, and I think y'all just described your origin stories the way that the Avengers are described, because you have the visionary, the radical, the entrepreneur, the intellectual, the ethical one. Like, that's how every major superhero movie starts. So congratulations on having that super cool Avengers origin story. It also just happens that when you like each other, then things get done, because you've been on boards, I'm sure we all have, where when there's tension and there's too much disagreement, it's hard to get anything done, but y'all just liked each other. You happened to do this. And in your article, Judge, I read you didn't have a specific vision, but you ended up transforming the State Bar of Texas. So do y'all want to describe some of those specific accomplishments?
We were blessed because of a gentleman by the name of Simon Rodriguez, who was the first Hispanic general counsel of a state agency. Simon came to us. He sought us out as young folks and said, I need to plug you all in. You all need to have an outfit with the state bar. We had the opportunity that the state bar was on our doorstep. And Simon was good enough to see that. And so that outlet benefited every one of us.
They didn't know what to make of us. I mean, when I came to Austin, I knew 3 other lawyers, Hispanic lawyers in Austin. And I didn't want to go back to Edinburgh, Texas, where my parents were I'm sure, and there was trouble awaiting me. I stayed here. I went down to make a living, trying to make a living doing court appointments, and they saw my skin. They didn't give me a language test. They saw my skin, and they said, "You speak Spanish, don't you?" I said, "See." And I started getting court-appointed cases for all the Hispanics who were arrested, because back then there would be a stamp wet on your jail card, on your booking card, and that's how I knew who was going to get held over and who I was going to get appointed to. So our friend here, Alberto Garcia, actually, when he was a municipal court judge, he ended APD's policy of doing that, which was a good thing. But that's how I got into doing immigration, because most of the people that I got appointed to who spoke Spanish needed immigration help. And so just kind of one thing led to another.
And I think that was around the time that the bar decided it needed input from minority board members. So there was, for a time, I don't know if it still exists, a designated minority representative on the bar, on the bars, and the young lawyers were not far behind that. The Texas Young Lawyers Association and Pee Wee Rodriguez and Alex Acosta had been young lawyer presidents, I think, right before you, right, Richard, around that same time period?
They were, I don't know. I don't recall that, because I was that active in the Young Lawyers. I went straight to the state bar.
Yeah.
The big lawyer.
Yeah, but and them and Kirk Watson were people that, you know, would reach out to us, because we were all about the same age. And so we had some input with young lawyers as well as with the main bar, and those were interesting integration efforts by the bar. Sometimes it was awkward because you'd end up getting pointed to committees. I remember serving on the real estate committee because, you know, and I had no idea about real estate, but so. I feel bad that I probably didn't contribute very much other than, you know, my Hispanicness.
Well, and one of you, is it you, was appointed to the Commission for Women in the Profession.
Yeah.
Was that you?
No, I was the one that appointed her. Because when I was making appointments as state bar president, you have limited appointments, but I wanted to make sure there was diversity everywhere. And there was a position for women in the profession. There's one slot left. And I thought among the group, and I said, David's probably the best one. Yeah, they wouldn't throw him out.
Well, he appointed me, and somebody appointed Matt Kidd, Judge Matt Kidd. And we ragged on the dean of the law school for years about women law professors, because it was the dean that just died. What was no. I'm blanking on the dean's name. He served for many years. He just passed away a couple of years ago. But we would meet annually with him and get a report from him and urge him to recruit women law professors. And it was a real challenge. He took it to heart, but it was hard at the time to compete. Women were in much demand across the country.
Well, you did a good job, because by the time I was at UT Law, I took classes from at least 4 or 5 women professors. So women ended up there.
Well, and Susana Alemán was critical to that, and she was there at the time, so she'd help us with info to utilize to prepare for those meetings. So that was a fun thing. And those are the kind of things that the organization's impact has, where you wouldn't think it, but it kind of expands the role of our influence in areas.
I think it's important to make everybody understand the environment back then, what it was like. And Tommy, you have some stories of what it was like back then, so that you can kind of get a feeling, besides the fact there were very few of us, but what it was like to practice.
See, speaking Spanish and getting appointed doing criminal law cases, I started to get people coming in from outside of Austin to come to a Spanish-speaking lawyer. There was a radio station, KMXX, and they were in Spanish language commercials, and Gonzalo Barrientos did some Spanish language commercials. They went all over Central Texas. People started coming to me, asking me to immigration help or criminal help. And so the atmosphere in 1980, I get hired to go out to Smithville, Texas, where a man's being held in jail because he had a knife in his boot in a bar. And I had no idea. And so I go walking into the courtroom, and I go walking into the dock like I do here in Travis County. And they said, no, that you've got to stay behind there. That's for lawyers. And I said, well, I'm a lawyer, so I had to show my card. So that was okay. So I'm okay. But then I got, schooled on priorities. And so I was the last one. And so they went through all the other lawyers in the bench, and they knew who I was, and they knew who I represented. They went through all the other lawyers in the bench, and all the lawyers, after they did their stuff, they stayed. And they wanted to know what I wanted. And so I was like, well, I have some time to file some pretrial motions. So one of my law school buddies had shown me Gerald Goldstein's famous criminal defense motions. And so I filed all this paperwork. I didn't even understand it. I filed it with the court. And I thought, well, this is what it is. So I went back. I knew I had to go back, but I was scared. It was really an intimidating situation. So I called up my buddy Richard. I said, Richard, come with me. We're going to go to Smithville, Texas, where I don't know what's going to happen. And we got up there, and the judge said, what do you want? What do you want? I said, I want the same thing that he got, pointing to the white defendant. Because back then, we were an anomaly where outside of Travis County, there was nobody in Williamson County or Hays County. Not till later, from our class, Marcos Hernandez went to Hays County, and became an elected official and a judge, and and all of that. But I mean, there was nobody out there. They didn't know us. I mean, my education, our pedigree, helped us move forward, but we were a unique item, and so it made it and it was scary. It was scary. I mean, yeah, it was scary.
Well, it's one of the things, Amanda, just, to help with the story along, one of the things that's important in the history of the evolution of this and the inclusion of minorities at the state bar was, I believe it was in the early 90s. I was Austin Bar president, and Jim was Jim. And Jim says, hey, Richard, here's what I want. Can you get me a meeting with the state bar president? And the state bar president was Jim Parsons. And I didn't know Jim, but Kirk Watson was a young lawyer president. We knew Kirk a little bit, but the state bar was very intimidating at that time. It was comprised mainly of white males, mainly from big law firms. We had very little integration, very little, and very few women. And it was a system that worked, but not for everybody. So I said, sure, Jim, I don't know, so I made the call, and he said, yeah, I'll see you guys at such and such. Wanted to know who was coming, and Jim will tell you who showed up. But at any rate, Jim says, I say, what are we going to talk about, Jim? I got the meeting. And he says, here's my list. He throws down, it's like, 10 items or something up. And I said, are you joking? One of them was, State Bar will have an Office of Minority Affairs. The law schools will start tracking minority lawyers, so forth and so on. And okay, here goes. And Jim, you can take it from here.
We have decided this is time. We're here in Austin. It's time for us to make a difference. Understand, if you were African American at that juncture, there was no way that the state bar knew. The first decision was to do a census of the state bar and making sure who everybody was, where we were. And then the agreement had to be, this isn't enough. So we asked that there be minority directors. So they created these at-large directors, 2 positions.
Jim Parsons was the one that was a great ally for us, but for the insistence of Jim, we would not have an Office of Minority Affairs at the State Bar. He was also interested in pipeline for law schools. They didn't, they would tell us, oh, we got all these minorities coming in, but they wouldn't tell us how many were coming out, and so forth and so on. So that in the early 90s was a great breakthrough. We were meeting in the president's office, and we gave him the list and said, this is our demands. And we started explaining some of them, and he took some time, he looked at them, he started reading them, and we were wondering, is he going to kick us out? Really, seriously. And he read them, and Kirk Watson was next to him. And Jim says, okay, they're yours, all of them.
Sometimes you walk into a meeting with a list of grievances and it works out just fine.
Well, it was a sympathetic audience. I mean, it was an audience that was ready for a change. And we had to go through this legislature to get some of this stuff done, and there was some monetary outlay in creating the offices. They had to hire folks to create the Office of Minority Affairs, and Jim Parsons was just, a godsend. And so was Kirk, because he basically was there to back up Jim whatever was necessary to do. So the money was going to be spent. And you may not remember this, Richard, but I do. If we suggested somebody serve on the State Bar Committee, Parsons just appointed. He filled up the committees with minority folks. Whoever we suggested he put on a committee, Parsons decided these folks want some more minorities. We don't have enough. We're going to make it happen. What a godsend for us.
It was a good impetus for the creation of a section, and, it became clear to us that a lot of the difficulty in maintaining our Hispanic organization, or the Capital Area Mexican American Lawyers, or the Texas organization, was the logistics of and the cost of that, and the section working within the bar with others on similar interests, utilizing those resources was a very valuable thing.
And when y'all started talking to the state bar about this, did you ever interact with other local bars that wanted to follow this model as well?
We were working in tandem with across the state.
Yeah, like Dallas had a strong group of Hispanic lawyers that were working. That lady and her husband, Adelfa Callejo, and her husband were really incredible. They were civil rights people, And then over in El Paso, there was a very strong group. To San Antonio, Pete,
Houston,
and Houston had a very strong group of lawyers, and the Valley was less so. I will say, in Brownsville, there was some of the Garzas and others were Judge Reynaldo Garza's son David and others were pretty active. But it was because everybody was a Hispanic lawyer there.
Right.
The bar was a Hispanic bar.
Right.
And so it was a little different. But so we got to meet a lot of folks around the state.
They would spring for us to go to a bar retreat with all the Hispanic leadership across the state. And we would have a come to Jesus kind of moment with these folks, because you would get I'd go in the evening before and say, listen, these are what we need. This is what we need to accomplish. Everybody got charged up for going in because, and it helped because those who had felt isolated from the state bar, we wanted them to be in the same kind of energy level we were for change. My major concern was that we would never achieve representation. You have to have a focus across the state that is a desirable goal. I wasn't afraid of pushing the edges. This is not a good job that's finished.
The five of us here, what I view us as is a basketball team. In a basketball team, everyone has their different positions and everyone contributes. And in order for the team to win, you have to work as a team. And that's what the five of us did. And Javier mentioned Javier Medina. He's not here again. But I want to follow up on what Jim was saying. I mean, he's absolutely right about the struggle is not over. We've accomplished a lot. But I'm going to tell you another Jim story.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this episode coming out next week.